All right, everybody, welcome to this 7 Insider talk today. My name is Espen, and I'm gonna talk a bit about my job as a picture editor and try to explain and give you some insight into how I think as an editor and what kind of stories, pictures I look for and we look for in the paper I work for, and also share some insight into how we deal with stories now compared to just some few years ago. So I'm going to just share my screen now and start the presentation, and feel free also to ask questions if you have any. I will do my best to answer them, and we can go through any questions at the end of this webinar. Give me a second and I will show you there. Okay. So my job today is not really just being a picture editor. I'm really not working that much as a classic picture editor anymore. I'm more of a producer, meaning that I not only edit pictures, but I also look closely at text, design, and going through everything that has to do with presenting a story online on VG. So I work in the hub in VG, which is Norway's biggest daily newspaper, and this is a small group of people. We are 5 people. It's me, 2 art directors, designers as well, and then a text editor as well. And together we kind of handle all the large, most of the large feature stories or articles that's going to be live on VGNO, which is the online version of the newspaper or and the magazine. So what we do in this hub is that we edit and design and create these stories online, where we kind of look at the project or the story and try to find ways to tell the story based on pictures, of course, and the text, but also we also add other features like graphics and other kind of design elements to the stories. And we also identify stories early in the beginning, like early in the process. So before a reporter, a photographer has been out doing any stories, we kind of identify the stories and get into the process so that we can be able to help and also advise the reporters on how to solve the story and how to do it. And this is because we want the story, of course, to be as good as possible and optimal for an online experience. And everything we do is now based on, or almost everything we do now is based on mobile phones, meaning that the stories and the pictures that we get in and also what we design and create needs to function best on mobile devices. And the reason is easy. We see 80%, 75, 80% of our readers online use their mobile phones when they read articles, see pictures, or do both, and also look at videos. So, sorry, we do design the stories to work on of course, laptops and widescreens as well. But the main task is to make sure that the projects and the pictures works on mobile phones. As I said, I changed my job from classic picture editor to becoming more of a net-based, internet-based producer a couple of years ago. So before that, the focus for us were on the printed magazine. We have a weekend magazine which had and still has a lot of focus on images. So I'm just going to show you a bit how this magazine looks and how we use pictures and what kind of stories we use there. We still print stories in this magazine because it's on the street every Saturday, but the focus on the magazine is not as it used to be, meaning that we don't buy stories exclusively for the magazine anymore. We buy stories that needs to work online, and then the magazine kind of selects stories that it wants to print as well. I don't do any picture editing for the magazine anymore. I work 100% now or 95% for the online production. So this is how I used to work very often when we worked on big features in the magazine. Either it was from the staff photographers and reporters, or if we bought freelance stories and needed to edit them. It was really a paper-based way of producing the magazine all the way through the printing press, really. And that has changed a lot. Now, most of what we do is on screen. Of course, we do print, not now the last year, because we've been in home offices and not in the VG newspaper office, and so we don't have access to printers and stuff. But this is how we kind of, or I kind of work together with art directors and others to edit the stories. So most of the content in the magazine used to be and still is online, produced by the staff team in VG, meaning that sometimes we buy stories, but that's not very often. And I'll get back to that and also come back to what we look for and how to pitch in a story or sell a story. But from time to time, we of course buy stories. This is from Jonas Bendixen from China some years ago, where the focus was to print and not online, and we used everything we had on the printed version and not on the online content. This is just to show you how we kind of used images in the magazine, which of course is still the best place to showcase work, because you have the magazine is in big format. It's not like a mobile phone with small screen, so it's actually possible to show the pictures really well. And also we had the covers, which was kind of a prominent place in the magazine, and that's now changed, because every story in a way now online has its own cover. So this kind of work now has moved from being on the on the printed edition with the design and everything, and we moved it into the online version of the paper, meaning that we still use these kind of stories, and we use a lot more of these kind of stories now. But the thing is that most of the work needs to be more suitable for online, the online edition of VG, because there's some limitations when it comes to showcasing things online, and also you have a lot of more possibilities when it comes to showing work online. I will also get back to that. So this is a story I did from the US some few years ago, and this is maybe the first story where we really focused a lot on the online version of the story as well, not only the printed one. We used quite a lot of brain power into making this story in the printed paper, but we also moved our focus with this story into the designing a good online story. So from doing these kind of things now, and this is important for you as photographers, I think, to know and understand, is that this is what we do today. We work with pictures, text, graphics, everything online and not print, meaning that there's some different kind of things we look for now compared to when we used the printed edition. And the reason is, or one of the reasons is, of course, that we now can measure and see what the readers like to read and how they read it, where they exit the stories, how they engage in the story, etc. That we can do in a much more detailed way than we could just a few years ago when we only had the printed version. When we had the printed version, it was kind of, we buy this story and we don't know how it's received, because people buy the newspaper not because of that story, but because of the front page very often of the paper. And we don't know if this story was well received or not. And today, we can see what kind of stories that's well received and how people read them. And some people talk a lot about clicks, and that is the only thing that matters. But for us, it's the reading time that's really important, meaning that if an article has a long reading time, it means that people have stayed in the story and read the whole story. Shorter reading time means that people have not read the whole story or jumped out of the story maybe after 50%, 20%, whatever. So these are things we look for, and that's important for us when we create the stories, to see and try to understand these numbers. And that also influences what kind of stories we would like to present in the magazine or in the online edition. And that's also something that photographers today should be aware of. And I don't expect photographers to know this, because this, of course, depends on the publication, but to know some kind of basic things that's different for online editions than the printed editions. I think that's important for photographers to know. So this is basically what we do today. We design and make these stories online, which is very often picture driven or based on images and videos. And a mobile phone kind of demands us to keep the reader there. Compared to a printed edition, we need imagery that kind of works well. We need pictures that kind of works with the text, and we need to keep the reader in the article for as long as possible. In these features we make, we don't have any advertisements. So this is basically clean features with text, pictures, video, whatever, and no advertisements, meaning that we don't really earn that much money on these stories. But it's important for us as a newspaper to have both international stories, local stories, stories that's in the news, stories that's well told, stories that's about people's lives, and so on. And by creating these stories and looking for pictures and text that can work for these stories, we also have used a lot of energy on that. But as I said, a lot of the stories you see, like here, is based on staff, reporters and photographers. And also, of course, very often we use wire imagery from wire services. So what we do, in addition, of course, to work with pictures, which is kind of the fundament for all stories today, it's that it needs to be visual. To make these special features like I work with every day now, it won't work if we don't have visuals. And then we end up just producing it as a classic news story, and we don't use energy to try and showcase the story in a nice way. So for photographers, this is a really good opportunity to get their work shown in a different way than in a printed edition. So we use Final Cut, of course, to edit and make videos. We use motion or After Effects to make graphics and other kind of design elements. We use Photoshop to do also a different kind of design, and Illustrator also in the design process of the story. But as a photographer, so what is today expected of you when it comes to selling in a story or selling in a project or trying to get the story showcased in in a magazine or newspaper online. So what we in where I work, what we look for is kind of a full package, a complete story, meaning that to just buy as a set of images with no text or just basic captions is not that we don't do that very often. And the reason is that we see that most stories really works well when we also have some text. Not in every case. It depends on the story, of course. So meaning complete stories can be video, it can be photography, it can be other elements that you work on, it could be video portraits instead of still image portraits. All these kind of things is something we look for when we produce these projects. Very often, of course, when we use staff photographers, we discuss in advance what we would like to do or what we would like to have. Other times, when we buy external stories, we hopefully the photographer has kind of thought through everything in advance. And we also, of course, look for different image styles, like in this article, where you have a story that's told in two different ways, with both images and with the text. And we also look for photographers who explore the possibilities that online presentation gives you, and meaning that do you do sound, do you do video, do you do other kind of things? Let's see. So that's also something that's important today for photographers, I think, is to be really open for what is possible to do now compared to when it was only things for print. What is possible to, can I use sound in this story? Can I use video in this story and other things? When I talk, it sounds like, oh, we want everything all the time, and that's not the case. We really want, we try to focus the stories and do a kind of a, we want to choose what to go for in a way in a story. So it's not only like we ask for, we want to buy a story and we ask, oh, do you have video, do you have this, do you have this, do you have this? And we try to decide what would be the best way to tell this story. So when it comes to what we expect or hope to get from photographers, it's original stories, of course, that the photographers not copy other projects or ideas, but have their own ideas. And if it's the same idea as someone else or same story as someone else, that the story is told in a very different way. And if you kind of manage to present a story like this, and it's also something that will stand out in the crowd, I think. We also, of course, look and try to develop with the staff photographers their own style, and that they have a photographic style in their work, and that we see that in the pictures. And I think also it's important that the idea doesn't need to be a 5-year-long project. Sometimes we can use a week on a story, other times 2 days, and sometimes a year. It depends. But I mean, it's not that a project, when you sell a project or want to contact an editor or picture editor, that you need to show the biggest project ever. It's much more important that the story is original or done in a different way, I think. And very often I get several emails every day from photographers selling in stories, and I see that maybe 90% of those stories, they are ideas that are circles around crisis, poverty, war, crime, these kind of stories, which are really important, and we showcase that kind of work often. But at the same time, what I really miss is more positive stories that can be stories that document something that's can be a crisis, or it can be something that's not really good, but that it's told in a very different way, meaning that it's possible to tell a story with a positive kind of feeling to it, even though the story in itself is more negative. So all these things is kind of what we look for when we look for work or look through work. So of course, think online. That should be in your kind of in the front of your head when you work now. Will this idea or this work, will it function online? And what does my story need to consist of to work online? And also try to, as a photographer now, try to get as much information as you can from different kind of media houses regarding how they work with online stories. Because the more you know of how media houses work and what they look for and so on, the better your idea will be. The better you can adapt your story or make your story work for the media you want to contact. But when I talk about all this, it's of course the basic and the thing in the bottom here is of course that the story needs to be close to your heart. You know, you need to work on something that you really burn for, something that you that you really want to do. Don't do it just because this is the best right thing to do now, or this is the best thing to do to win a prize or whatever. You need to find a story that's close to your heart. And what's your preferences? Do you want to advocate something? In my newspaper, we are kind of strict when it comes to like photographers, reporter with a political voice. It needs to be objective in the way that you don't go out and make a story and you finance by Doctors Without Borders, or you finance by a company or anything like this. We wouldn't buy it. It needs to be independent journalism. And what about text? I think very often it works best when you have a good text with your pictures. And there's two ways of doing this. I'll come back to it later, but it's important to also, at least for us, to see that there are some text with the pictures. I talk based on my experiences as an editor. I don't talk on behalf of any other editor. So please be aware that other editors, other picture editors might think differently when it comes to all this, what I'm saying now. This is based on what I have experienced. I've been a picture editor now for 12 years, and I've also been a photographer and combined those two things. So I've kind of been on both sides. So I try to use this experience to talk a bit about this. And talking about having these two roles as a photographer and a picture editor, I'm just going to show you as an example of how I work as a photographer now when I work online with these stories. So just to say that I am not a picture editor that sends myself out on assignments. From time to time, I work on my own ideas very often, and other times I work closely with the reporter, and we kind of decides how to make a story. So this is a story about the pandemic in Norway, where we looked at the consequences of the lockdown in Norway, and we looked at the consequences for the weakest people in Norway, like the weakest groups in Norway, like drug addicts, people with mental issues, and so on. And the idea here was to portray them, meet them in their homes, and tell the stories. So with that in mind, I kind of work, and this is how I work to complete the story. And that's for the online edition. And I work very closely with the reporter who writes the text, and we cooperate from the beginning. When we plan the project, we try to find some people we want to meet and interview, and I think of how to solve the pictures in this story. And because it's an online edition, it's more important than when we had the printed edition. Now today, it's even more important that the text and the pictures kind of work together in VG. meaning that, you know, when we have full frame images on a mobile phone, the text often scrolls over the pictures, so that the pictures and the text kind of goes hand in hand through the whole story. It's important. And then there's also some technical issues still with producing these features, and that is that on a mobile phone, the horizontal picture will be cropped to a vertical one. So it needs to work both on laptops and on mobile phones. And so when I do photograph a story like this or make a project like this, I tend to focus a lot also on, together with the reporter, okay, what is important to tell here text-wise? What is important to show here picture-wise? And I use a lot of energy also to get as close to people as I can. And we see that very often in the stories we make. When you manage to make a story that's very close to people, that we are almost in their bed, it's like the readers sense that this is a story that I can trust and a story that relates to me in one way or another. So I try to combine very often, it depends on the story, of course, but to combine reportage with portraits or reportage with others, with details and so on. And like in this story, which is a drug addict who committed suicide because he was thrown out of a clinic that he was treated on, and because the clinic closed down because of the COVID-19, and he was thrown out, he took his own life. So we managed to join the funeral where the family was. And there I don't use a lot of time on this, maybe 2-3 days on each person. So this is a project that's only with the pictures I might have used a week in total. But then I also produce the story, which very often takes more time than to take the pictures. So what I think of when I'm out shooting a story is also details. Okay, she's talking about the funeral. Okay, we need a picture from the funeral that they have in their album. She takes us with us to where he used to live, her husband who committed suicide. So I join her when she goes there. And all these kind of pictures I try to get so that the story kind of feels more complete. And when I edit it for the online version, it kind of starts with full frame pictures like this to introduce the story. And then it's kind of text and pictures running together through the whole story, meaning that the reporter might write the text so it suits the pictures, that this picture can come here and this can come there. And other times it's that, okay, in this part of the text, we really need a picture of this. Okay, I have that. Okay, that's the picture that should be there. And this is something that you as a photographer, of course, it's hard to, as a photographer, to kind of plan all this when you're out shooting a project. But that's why I'm telling you that text is also important, because very often a story is based on both text and images. This is another story in that same project about people with mental issues, and we did the same here. Here is the text. The text is much shorter, meaning that we used more space on images and less space on text in this story. But I have the same kind of idea in my head when I shoot, you know, and it's all based on how I want to portray them and what they're doing really. Also, you know, when I visit them, are they doing anything, or am I just doing portraits? So what kind of stories are we looking for? I would say there's some, you can kind of divide it into some kind of groups or themes, or at least some key points. So exclusivity is important for us, meaning that we look for exclusive stories, not like a random picture of a famous guy walking down the street, but exclusive stories, features that might not have been online, printed or been online many other places, or that it has something that's not been seen before. We will also want to be able to get behind closed doors, meaning that not when I say secret places, I mean that can be in behind the scenes of the World Trade Organization when they decide that this is a pandemic, or what happens when the UK prepares to leave the EU. Get behind the closed doors and see what's going on there. We look for emotions, that a story can create emotions and touch people. And identification is also something that's important, that a story should create identification and recognition among the readers, meaning that very often we need something in the story that people can relate to in one way or another. And the story needs to be suitable for online presentation. So it needs to work as an online feature. And then also we need to have interaction between text and images. And very seldom we buy just a set of pictures, meaning that to create an online feature that's just images and a very short caption, we don't really do it anymore. And this is also the reason why we don't do this anymore, is that on a mobile phone, people kind of read the story in a different way than they did in a magazine. In a magazine, we could have a short intro text of 5 lines and then have pictures and captions. Today, when you scroll through a story, the text cannot just be captions over pictures, because that's not really a text or not really a story. That's just the caption is very often just something that tells the name, the place, and what is happening in the picture or something like this. That doesn't work on a mobile phone. To have text that kind of helps me as a reader get through the story and gives me more information or additional information is something we look for. So that's one of the reasons why we don't do like clean, normal photo essays anymore. Small and big, I mean that you want to tell a big story about a big topic. Very often it works to find use a small story to tell a bigger story, meaning that one person or a group of people can kind of be the kind of main story that tells about the big story. And as I said, originality, so new ways of telling stories is something we look for. And timeliness, stories connected to current events and news is also something that's very often we work with stories that's connected to the current events that's going on in the world. It can be Corona, it can be the elections in the US, it can be Brexit, it can be any other things. And that's something that you should think of also when you make stories, that if you manage to make an exclusive story that is really tightly connected to something that's important right now in the world, that's something that's good. And we also look for stories that have sales potential. And when I say sales potential, I mean that some of the stories we produce in VG is behind paywall, and some are open for everyone. So the stories that we want to put behind the paywall, we also need to kind of we take into consideration that is this a story that will manage to get people to actually click into the story, pay for it and read it? Or do we think that this is not the kind of story that people want to pay for? When we do that kind of thinking of our own stories that's made in-house, we do this kind of thinking and we decide if it's going to be open or if it's going to be behind paywall. So online we produce a lot of different stories. When I say image story here, it's a story with pictures, but it's also a text that kind of runs over the pictures. We can produce more clean text stories. We can produce video stories based mostly on video. Of course, we use full screen images. We use classic stories that combines text and images. We can divide the story into chapters. We can combine images, video, text, and graphics. And we also have a team that create this special design and coded stories that's done from scratch in a way. So this is a story that was sold in by a freelancer, and it's based on her experience during COVID-19 lockdown, and how she tells her personal story with mostly video and sound on how she has anxiety and how she deals with the fear of COVID-19. And this is really short texts and videos. This is a story that Kyrre Lien, a really good Norwegian photographer and video maker or video producer, made some few years ago, where he interviewed people who are active online, and they are called internet trolls, that has kind of really they are aggressive online. They write kind of upsetting things online and comments a lot on Facebook and so on. So this was a project that he did himself with videos and pictures and text. And when he sold in this project, he didn't only send us a lot of videos and a lot of text. He actually used an online web client to produce this and design it to show us how it can look at the end. I think that's also something that becomes more and more important, that you as a photographer, when you have a project and you worked on it for, let's say, 2 months, and you're gonna show it to an editor, if you can share a link, and in that link or on that website, you have kind of almost like created the project with, okay, here is the text going to be like this, the pictures like this, so that I as an editor can see the idea already, how you think and how you think this can work. I think that's a good way of showing your work. And as I said, there's different ways of showing pictures online. This is from the website that for WeTransfer, where they also use some text and then a lot of pictures, and they don't use it full screen here. They use it more with frames in a way, so it's you can see the full picture and not only the vertical version of the pictures. This is a story I did last year about my pregnant partner during lockdown. It's based on pictures and a little, not much text, and it's a kind of a diary text that runs through the story together with the pictures. But it's really a picture-driven story. But as you can see, there's also text here. So that's what I say when we don't buy picture stories. I mean, we don't present this as just pictures. And this on the right side is also a picture story. It's based on just scroll over text and images. And in this scroll over text, it's not just captions, or it's not captions. It's really a story that's been told throughout the pictures. And that's also a key thing to have in mind when you work on a project for online presentation, is that you really want the viewer to stay with you through the whole story. So you need to use both pictures and text as almost cliffhangers to keep the attention of the viewer and bring the viewer further on in the story. And then we have, of course, clear, more video-driven stories. And this one is from the national broadcaster in Norway, where they used, it's a very effective and short story. And that's told with these few cards in a way that you can scroll through, and you have short text. And the same with VG's story about the Tinder, this Tinder guy who stole money from a lot of women, dating them and then starting to get money from them. And VG kind of followed in his tracks and interviewed several other victims and managed to get hold of a lot of content from Facebook, WhatsApp, and other places, and they use this as videos in the story. So this was also told in a very more efficient way. This is maybe not the best idea for for a photographer to present his story. But I'm showing you this because it's so important to keep in mind what kind of possibilities there are out there now to present your story, and that it's a really a matter of a creative process where you know them, not the limitations but the possibilities, and within those possibilities you can do a lot of exciting things with your work, I think. And this is how the stories, when they're not on mobile phones, looks online on wide screens. It's basically the same. It looks the same, but it's not vertical pictures, it's horizontal pictures. And this is also a story that's based mostly on pictures and some few video clips, and the story is just very efficient, told with few lines of text. And this is pictures done by André Lyon, and that he was in Brazil and made this story for VG. And then we have a more, like I said, a combination of graphics or more classic ways. This is New York Times, a very classic way of telling a story with some pictures and text. And then we have graphics that we use a lot also in stories, where we use pictures and text and graphics. And the same with the Trump story, where we combine quotes from his Twitter and pictures of his kind of appearances. And then there's some more special designs things like this one. This is like I showed you earlier, you know, the PDF of the story from the US, where I showed you the printed version. This is the online version, where it was one of the first stories that we really put a lot of effort into creating it from working online. And here as well, when I'm out working, this is a story I did, and I use time to do my pictures, of course. I do video, but also, you know, I can use time finding old video clips, for example, in archives, if we need that, or we need to buy in external imagery from other photographers who's been covering specific events. I use time to find that and buy that as well. So that's also something that's important in a project. When you work on a project, does your project need more than just the pictures? Does it need archive shots? Does it need, like here is the archive picture from the walk in Charlottesville. This is the archive of Ku Klux Klan. All these things is important to think of when you work on a story that you want to present online. So this is kind of how pictures work on a mobile phone today. You know, you can show the picture as it is in a vertical, and it becomes quite small on a mobile phone. Nobody turns the phone into a horizontal position. Like, we can measure that, and there's nobody. Everybody now is so used to scrolling, holding the phone in a normal way, scrolling down, and that's because Instagram, Facebook, all social media, all websites, everything is based on scrolling straight down and in a horizontal mode. So we don't design things and to say to readers, please flip the phone, because people don't flip it anymore. So this is how we can use the pictures. We can crop them a bit so that they fill more of the screen, or we use them full screen images like this, and they will be even more cropped. And that is, of course, the biggest challenge maybe for you as photographers today. And also when you're going to sell in a story, a lot of photographers, and most photographers, of course, care a lot about their story and their work. And it's heartbreaking sometimes to see pictures being cropped into something like this. And that needs to be kind of a cooperation between the designer, the picture editor, and the photographer who kind of sells in the story. So for pictures online, it's important that you kind of build a story, so that the story select images or shoot images and select images that kind of makes the story develop. So it's not a flat story. And that, I mean, by maybe finding pictures that can be cliffhangers, because online, when people read stories and they scroll, there needs to be things that creates attention all the way through the article. And kill your darlings is also important when you send in work for a picture editor. And make sure also that you document more than you plan, like detailed pictures and pictures that can both expand the story and explain the story, and make sure to include them in a picture, in a story you're going to sell. But don't select a lot of images just because you can. Online stories, they all often invite to a massive use of pictures, but the pictures shouldn't kill each other. So you need to cut down your pictures and make a tight edit when you send it to an editor. And be creative, and don't do shortcuts when you work. Try to look for original ways to tell your story. The more original, or the more you surprise a picture editor, I think the more the chance is that the picture editor is actually going to buy that story. And it's also good to kind of find the key image in a story when you're going to sell it, and use that as the poster picture in a way. And that's also often the picture that kind of ends up as the key image in the online feature. And when I said that we don't use cover pictures, we kind of use cover pictures on mobile phones, because the first picture that appears in a story is the cover for that story. But also make sure to have more images than that you send, so that if a picture editor asks for more work or more pictures to look through, you have them easily accessible and can send them. And sometimes also video can add important content to the story. It's not that we use video just because it's video. It needs to add something to the story. It needs to be something that makes the story better. And very often we see that if we use the video in the wrong way, people jump out of the story. They get annoyed by suddenly there's a video here. Why is it a video? And especially if there's sound on it and they have to tap to get sound, then it's important to think and use video in a smart way, and that the video is there to help the story, and you have a clear idea on what this video should be. So as I said, when it comes to selling stories, it's important that, at least for me as a picture editor, or the others who buy stories at VG, that we buy finished stories and not ideas. So you need to get my attention, and as I said, I get a lot of emails on different kind of stories all the time. So you need to find a way to stand out of the crowd. And also, it's important for me as a picture editor that you know the ethics, and that you know that this is something, or I know that I can trust you as a photographer. So when I say say how to sell, I think one thing it's very important. It's that a picture editor's inbox is very often very full, and there's a lot of emails. So don't present your idea or your project or your story in a long email. Few lines, introduction. What is this, and why is this good for me? Is what you should write, and then you can add more later on in email or in a PDF or other places. Do proper research before you present an ID. I mean, if you're going to send an ID, it needs to be well thought through. And also make nice presentations with image IDs, description, budgets, and plans for your project. As I said, now I'm not talking so much about VG, since we not very often buy stories before they are produced. We very often say, okay, this story sounds like could be an interesting project, but we really want to see the pictures. That's hard financially for many photographers. I'm going to talk a bit about how that can be done too, as well. And also, as I said, make nice presentations of a project. This is an idea I had for VG, that go to Sierra Leone to make a story about a pink diamond. I'd been there some years before in a diamond mine, so I used all the archive pictures and added them to kind of visualize what's possible there. And I also added other stories I wanted to do. So some advices for you when you're reaching out to editors. I think it's important to contact the correct editor. So it's important to know the media you're contacting, you know, and that's, I see that a lot of times people don't really know what kind of media house this is, what kind of stories are we producing, and what are we interested in. And so try to specific, especially if it's for English speaking world, it's important to read the media and see what's the focus here, what kind of news house or media house is this. Remember that when you're selling a story, it's not only the picture editors that decides things, it's text editors, it's art directors who also do picture editing and layout and prepare text and make other decisions. So there's very often a lot of people involved in a project. And as I said, my work today is focused 99% on online presentation. So that's the first thing I look for is this a story that will work online? And do you have the whole package, as I said? And that's, I think, more and more media houses now look for work that will function well online. So if you have a kind of a story that you have thought through and have prepared and shot in a way that's going to make a good online presentation, I think that's you have more of a chance of getting your story in there. I talk now not about just like on personal projects, because of course as a photographer you want to be free. You don't want to have a lot of limitations on you when you shoot. But I think everything I say here is not a rule. It's some advices that you should have and you should know, and you should have this in your back head when you work. But of course it shouldn't limit you as a photographer. I think this should expand you as a photographer and make you maybe even more creative. And I think also to meet editors face to face can be a smart thing, because if they meet you and know you, it's easier when they see an email coming from you. They might kind of, that's him or that's her. Okay, I see that email. And some do or do not things here. Be organized. Don't send 100 images attached in an email, like 100 attachments. Make it as a PDF, or as I said earlier, as a link to a website. Please be patient. Hundreds of stories submitted. It takes time to answer, and sometimes we are not able to answer, or at least I am not able to answer, and especially now, because I'm not working as a classic picture editor anymore, meaning that I don't focus that much on buying in external stories. And if you don't get an answer, please you remember to send a reminder, a polite reminder. And you get a no, it's a no. Don't continue pitch or sell the story again and again if there's a no. And also please be self-critical. Is this story good enough? Is this a story that will work online? Is this a story that I'm happy with and I think is good? All these questions you have to ask yourself before you send the story. And as I said, know the media house. Will this story fit this kind of profile of this media house, or should I go to someone else? And also use graphics, use other kind of elements to kind of explain or to underline things in your project or your story. And sometimes you can even maybe make a logo or do a visual profile for the project, all these things to create a nicer presentation, you know. And I think also it's nice to have a good website and maybe a blog where you kind of update with the ongoing projects and a bit about yourself. And I think also to use social media actively in self-promotion is a good thing. I think a lot of photo editors, picture editors find photography online now and suddenly they reach out and ask you if you can work. And when it comes to payment, that's also always a negotiation. In VG, we hire photographers to do assignments, and then we have a flat fee we pay. But when you sell a project or a story that you've been out doing, it's going to be a negotiation, meaning that you will have one price in your head and the editor will have another price very often in his head. And as I said, we never sponsor any story in advance. So if you pitch a story and ask for money to travel there and do this, that's something we don't do. We buy finished stories in. And that's why it's very often important to have several different sources of income when you make a project, that you maybe get sponsorships from foundations or other, or you have a plan of selling it to different media houses, not only one, not maybe the same different media houses in the same country, but in different countries. And if we buy a story, it's for use both online, print, and in promotion of the story online, of course. And an exclusive story, I think, will make a better payment for you than a story that's been done many times before. So these kind of things here is important to keep in mind when you're gonna go out there and try and sell a story. That was kind of my presentation of being a picture editor, and a bit about what I look for, and also how my job as a picture editor has changed quite dramatically, and that also means that what we look for in a way has changed quite a lot. And I hope you guys have enjoyed, and that you at least get some information out of it. I don't know if there's any questions regarding my presentation here. Let's go into Q&A and see. Yeah. Yeah, I don't, there's one who asks that I don't often buy stories from external people. That's not a personal, and the question is if that's a personal decision. No, it's for VG, we still have 15 staff photographers, or not 15, 13 staff photographers, meaning that we produce a lot of the content ourselves still. And we have some freelancers we use a lot. Now I'm talking photographers. So that's the main reason why we don't buy a lot of external stories from external photographers. There's one here also who asks what is exactly the role of a picture editor. It depends. I mean, in New York Times, there's many picture editors. In VG, we are 4 or 5 picture editors and 1 photo director. So the 5 picture editors in VG, we work for different things. So we have 4 picture editors working for the news edition of the newspaper. And then you have me, who works for the stories division or the hub. And what the role of my role as a picture editor used to be almost exclusively focused on pictures and on stories and how to tell the stories, and guide photographers, and to kind of plan projects together with photographers and reporters and so on. Today, I don't do that so much. I'm much more focused on the whole product, meaning I'm doing text editing, I'm doing designing, I'm doing graphics, I'm doing layout, all these things together with the pictures. But still, I look at myself as a picture editor because I always have the pictures in the front of my head when I do a story or make a story online. There's one question here about post-production, and do the photographers have the freedom to do post-production however they want? Well, there's ethical standards for post-production, and I hope most photojournalists know these standards, meaning that you're not allowed to alter the content of an image. You can do normal kind of Photoshop adjustments, that's meaning contrast and color adjustments and things like this. And that's something we also have a software to check pictures when we get them in-house, to see if it's been done more than we kind of allow people to do with the pictures. So normal photoshopping, like adjustments, color corrections, contrast and so on, is what we kind of is allowed, but to move things out of the picture, to add things into the picture, these things is strictly forbidden. Yeah, do picture editors usually want exclusivity on the story when working with external photographers? Well, I mean, that's kind of, I tried to answer that earlier, but I mean, the more exclusive the story is, at least the more interested we are in seeing it and maybe buying it, because it depends on, of course, what the theme is, but exclusive stories that has potential is something that I would say is easier to sell. But what is an exclusive story? That's depending on the story, really. It's hard to say what an exclusive story is, but at least it's important that if you want to sell a story to VG, you don't also sell it to a competing newspaper here in Norway. There's one question here. Do you usually have a shoot list that you share with your staff photographers to make sure they cover a story according to your standards? How much freedom do staff photographers usually have in building the story the way they see it fit? I don't make a shoot list, but sometimes we discuss the story in advance, and I ask for things I would like to see. And then they are completely free to tell the story the way they want it. But of course, they need to have in mind that they shoot for an online story, meaning that they know that we might need more pictures than normally in printed editions. We might need different kind of pictures, or we might need video. So all this is something that they are kind of used to now when the staff photographers. But then we discuss, is this a video-driven story? Is this a picture-driven story? All these things we kind of discuss. In your pictures, the subject is mostly placed in the middle. Has it to do with the use of pictures online? Yes, that story I showed you now, normally I don't shoot like this, but I knew that this story is going to be full of use full screen images. That was something I planned in advance. And because they're cropped, and we have some limitations on how to use the pictures full screen on mobile phones, I needed to center most of the pictures that I knew was going to be used in the story. So that's correct, and that's well observed that the pictures are shot in that way. There's another, how frequently do you buy stories sent in from photographers who you have never heard of? Do you consider them the same way? It's hard to answer that, because and now I try to, a lot of the stories I get into my email box, I have to forward to some of the other pitch editors, because I really don't have the time to dive into the work, or I don't really have the need to dive into it, because the stories I work on stories that's already been produced, but and then now the last half year, it's been a lot of things going on when it comes to elections, the corona and all these things. So it's been extremely busy, and that also makes it harder for me to reply on all emails I get. Could you please elaborate how much time is spent on producing these stories you are showing? The production value looks high. You mentioned 1 week for a shoot, but longer for production. How much time, money do you invest upfront and in post? If you expect a fully complete stories, this could leave many of us out of pocket before knowing whenever there is a buyer, if that makes sense. Yeah, I totally understand. And I mean, we don't expect a complete project in the way that you should sit and design things and do all that. I mean, when it comes to complete project, I try to think of a complete project more as a project that the photographer has really thought through. And meaning that the photographer has thought, okay, this is a story that's going to consist of video portraits and reportage pictures. And this is how I would like it to be built up. And it has text, and this is the text, and it's written so that it works together with the pictures in a good way. That is a complete package in a way for me. I don't mean that you need to design and do all these things that kind of, and make graphics and make all these other elements. That's something that we do. So of course, it's also, as you say, it's gonna be very time consuming for you if you have to make stories from scratch and build them as we do to present them for a picture editor. What I mean is that you have a, let's say, Squarespace, and you just put into make a new web blank page, and you edit the pictures down on the blank page, put in video and the text. That can be done very easily, and then the complete design, that's very often, that's what takes time. There's one question here about how much photographers paid for a story they sell, or that depends very much. It can be $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, depending on the story and what's in the story, if it's video, if it's text, and so on. So it's hard to kind of give a fee like what we pay. Would online stories last forever? Do people often go back and reread? Well, I mean, sometimes we front the stories again after some few weeks on the front page of the online edition, and then people read it again. And we also have like this kind of a page where all these special features are gathered, so we can go directly to that page and see what we have made back in time. So they are there forever, but very often the numbers of readers drop significantly if a story is not on the front page of the newspaper, it won't attract any viewers. It needs to be on the front page of the newspaper to on the online edition to get viewers. So that's also very important for the stories, that they can compete with all the other stories that need space on the front page of the newspaper. Here's another question. This is Jonathan Wood. How old can a story be that is pitched? Does it need to be relatively newly photographed? I think so, yes. Most we don't use a lot of old stories in online. Are your stories protected from being used without payment? Yes. I mean, people can screen grab pictures how much they want, but we don't see that as a big problem here. What are the odds of you publishing an international story that is not relevant to your country? That's quite big, because we do a lot of foreign and international stories. We have a correspondent who's both a photographer and a reporter in Beirut. We have reporters in England. We have reporters in US. So I mean, we make a lot of international stories, and the focus for VG is both international and national. So we do both. Format for videos, MP4 or M4P, sorry, MP4 files or MOV files is what we use. Here's another question. Is it very often that a case where a photographer has to write text by himself? Yes, it depends. If you work together with a reporter, you don't have to write the text, but if you are a photographer and you work on a project alone, I think it's important that you also can write the text. That is good. And where you interview people, have quotes and so on that can be used in a story. It's good to, there's a question here about collaborating with a web designer. Yes, I think that is a good thing if you can kind of afford it, or you have someone you know that you can work with. That's something I think is good. So yeah, that is good. There's someone here, Sasha, who says, I like that you suggested that you look for positive stories despite or because of all the negative stories out there. And I think, yeah, I think that's because that's not something we don't see a lot. And I think that's also something that readers really enjoy. And we see also on stories that has kind of a positive touch is also well read among readers. We don't employ photographers overseas. We use freelancers overseas, maybe more than we use in Norway, but this also depends on, you know, what the developments are in different countries. I mean, sometimes the focus is France, and we are on the at the look for a photographer in France to use on shorter period of times. And then we also, of course, have contacts of photographers in many different places around the world, and that we can contact if we suddenly need something. And in your experience, is it better to approach an editor with a finished complete story, or with a story it's early conception. I think it's best to contact or approach an editor when the story is finished. That's because that's my experience. The problem, of course, is that then the editor is not able to kind of guide you in the direction that the editor would like you to shoot the project. But I think that's why it's so important for you as photographers to know the possibilities and know and be very clear about how to tell the story when you begin working on a project. Because when you are finished with the project and you sell it, it's so important that you have all these elements you need in a story. Yeah, VG I think it's 13 staff photographers, 13 staff photographers and 5 picture editors, and then of course a lot of reporters and others. Let's see here. I'm just scrolling through there's a lot of questions. You said that you would like to see the finished story. Did you mean article and pictures, or pictures and caption with a short story? I think it's important when you send an email, in the email, very short, what is this project? And then you, of course, have attached a PDF with a full article and the pictures. You mentioned it's always great to have text with. Is that to say you prefer if the photographer writes text to give the publication an idea and then the publication may have their own writers to do something? Or is it more attractive for the editor if the photographer can also create engaging text and works with the journalist writer in collaboration and then pitch the story together? I think that's the best, that you either write the story yourself or you work together with a reporter. It's more demanding for us if we need to find a reporter to write the text. We do it sometimes when we worked with André Leo, the photographer who worked in Brazil and in Italy for us during the coronavirus. He was kind of interviewing people for us and doing reporting, and then he sent us all the text he had gathered, and we had a reporter in-house who kind of created the text or wrote the article for him. So he gathered quotes and interviews, and we used them by having a reporter editing the text and putting the text together. But I prefer a whole complete a story and pictures together. You can pitch stories to many newspapers, but maybe not in the same country. And it's not a problem if it's been published, but if it's been published in the country, in the same country, then it's a problem, I think. Okay. Let's see. Then it's do people mail stories? I know that email is the go-to option, but receiving a story by mail could make it a standout from piles and emails. Thoughts? No, I don't think you should mail it in the old-fashioned way, because in VG, for example, we are not good at going down in the post room to get our post, and we get it so seldom that it's easily to forget. So be on use email or websites and share a link within email. Okay, everybody. It's 5:15. I have to leave you because I have 4 kids here who need some attention. I hope you all enjoyed. I have to say one thing. I think as a photographer, it's frustrating when you send in ideas and you don't get answer. And I know from time to time it might be that you don't get answer, and the reason is there's many reasons. My dream would be to have a secretary that could answer for me. But so I could have my email filtered a bit more, and I could focus more on getting back to people. Unfortunately, I sit and produce stories from 9 in the morning till 6 in the evening every day, and there's a pressure on producing stories, and it also takes a lot of time. So that is the reason why I, from time to time, don't have the possibility to answer. And don't think of picture editors as lazy people because they don't reply. I think you should please don't give up. And you know, from time to time, I take a really a dive into my emails and try to get back to as many as I can. Even though it's not every day I do that, I try to do it. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Again, there's even many questions. Okay, no, it's good. It's good. That you can see you can see this session here online on 7 Interactive. It's going to be online, I guess, in tomorrow or in a couple of days. So if you didn't manage to see everything today, you can go back and see it recorded. Thank you, everyone, for being here. It's been a pleasure. Have a good morning or evening or wherever you are. For me, it's evening. Bye-bye.